All right, I appreciate everybody coming out this evening. I put this meeting together. I was hoping that the Indian Trail Council would be kind enough to allow the Southern Environmental Law Center to come give their perspective on the bypass and their information they had to share with the public. I was told in no uncertain terms, no, I'm not interested. Now, I will point out that the mayor and Councilman Cone did at least, even though they're in favor of the bypass, they at least wanted to hear what they had to say. So that needs to be said. So we put this together just so that you'd have the opportunity to hear this side of the story. And Ms. Hunter and Asquith have a presentation, very brief presentation. And if you have any questions afterwards, feel free to ask them. And if you don't already have a handout, we'll get you one. Good information on the back. There's a website that you can go to and get more information. DOT also has a website for the bypass. There's another one, a more local website, MonroeBypassFacts.com, I believe, that you can even get a more local view of it. So if y'all would, I appreciate you.
Thank you for those of you who came at 5. I know there's been a lot of confusion about when this meeting was supposed to start and where it is, so we appreciate people who have waited around, and hopefully we'll make it worth your while. I'm Kim Hunter. I'm an attorney with the Southern Environmental Law Center, and this is my colleague Kate Asquith. And we don't want to impart necessarily our view of the bypass. We just want to let you know what our concerns are and some questions that you should be asking about the bypass. There are a lot of reasons to support the bypass. There are a lot of reasons not to support the bypass, and we just want to make sure you have the right information and they're asking the right questions, and so that if you are in favor of the bypass, you're supporting it for the right reasons. So just to start out with who we are, the Southern Environmental Law Center is a public interest law firm. We're a nonprofit organization. We work throughout the Southeast, and we have 2 offices in North Carolina. We represent public interest groups for free, public interest environmental groups. And in a few minutes, one of my clients, June Blotnick, with Clean Air Carolina, should be here. That's an example of one of the groups that we represent. One of our primary focus areas in North Carolina is transportation and land use because of the impact that it has on the environment, both the human and natural environment, air quality, water quality, habitat. And we've been working on this issue for 26 years. So why do local groups care about the Monroe Bypass? Well, our clients, North Carolina Wildlife Federation, Clean Air Carolina, and the Yadkin Riverkeeper, have been involved with the bypass for many years. And on behalf of these clients, we were the ones who brought the lawsuit challenging the accuracy of the information in the environmental impact statement, and was successful in the Fourth Circuit in May of 2012, a year and a half ago. We all agree, and our clients are very cognizant of the fact that congestion on US 74 is a big problem. And one of our big concerns here is that the bypass is not intended to fix that congestion. So we've been working for years looking at more smaller scale, less costly, and also more environmentally friendly ways of fixing the corridor and actually making it work for Union County residents. We believe that local communities deserve to be informed about the bypass's purpose and its likely impacts. And most of you have probably heard about an environmental impact statement before. That is what the whole lawsuit was based around. And the fundamental idea of an environmental impact statement is just that the state has a legal duty to put together the impacts of a project in a booklet, share it with the public, share that information with everyone so that everyone can accurately comment and shared their views. And the case that we brought was saying that that information was not accurate. So it's a very simple idea, this idea of having information out there. It doesn't say that the state has to choose a particularly environmentally friendly alternative. It just says we've got to know what's going to happen, we've got to share that with the public, and then let local decision makers and many of the mayors that we have with us here tonight make those decisions.
And most of the information that we're talking about tonight is coming from that process that NCDOT went through, and most of the information is from their studies.
So we'll start with a quick overview of the project. I'm sure most of you are familiar with it, but if not, here's the map of the 19-mile bypass. It is planned to be a 4-lane highway from Marshville coming out at Stallings 485 area. It's planned as a toll road, and the preliminary estimates for tolls would be $2.50 each way for passenger vehicles and $10.27 for large trucks. That's if you travel the entire 19 miles. There are 9 interchanges through the undeveloped areas of Union County. The construction cost, the most recent estimate we have, is about $900 million. The cost is not covered by the tolls. The tolls will cover a small fraction of that cost, but most of that cost is borne by the state, and the state has pledged to pay $24 million a year out of DOT funds for 30 to 40 years. DOT's most recent estimate, and its most recent draft of its environmental statement, is that when the bypass opens, it will save between 8 and 12 minutes, depending on the time of day, and that's if you're taking it from one end to the other. Some of you may have heard larger travel time savings put out there, like 20 or 30 minutes. Those are the travel time savings DOT expects to happen in 2035. So basically, DOT expects that US 74 will get so congested that in 2035, if you take the bypass, you'll save 20 to 30 minutes. But in opening year, it's expected to be 8 to 12. So as I mentioned, we brought a legal challenge to the bypass, and one of my clients, June Blotnick, just walked in, who is a plaintiff in the lawsuit. The United States Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit, that's one of the second highest courts in the United States, ruled against NCDOT unanimously, finding that it misled the public and other resource agencies in its environmental impact statement. The court recognized that the flawed review masked the bypass's impacts and prevented a fair comparison of alternatives, and that it was significant enough to warrant them to send it back to the agency to take another look. And so the court ordered DOT to reevaluate its review of the bypass. And again, that was a year and a half ago. And here was the headline in the Charlotte Observer the day after that decision. So since the court's decision, DOT is reevaluating its environmental review. I understand at the presentation last night in Indian Trail, they were quite clear that this was a very small fix, but I will note again that it's been a year and a half since that ruling happened, so we would have maybe hoped that a small fix could have been done a little faster. In the meantime, we've been in Union County talking with a number of elected officials, local citizens, community groups, people who will be impacted by the bypass, and talking with them about potential alternatives and just letting them dig into the data of what DOT is saying the projected impact of the bypass will be, because that's not always been squared with people's understanding. And Union County citizens from throughout the county, for a variety of reasons, have begun calling for DOT to analyze different alternatives and at least take a look at alternatives instead of the $900 million bypass. So one of the most important questions that I know we all want the answer to is, how would the bypass impact traffic in Union County? And a lot of people I talk to note that they really, really want this bypass because it's going to fix 74, and we know that 74 is very heavily congested. However, DOT regularly admits that the bypass was never intended to fix 74 and is not expected to much improve flow on 74. In fact, in one meeting, DOT admit that it would not be in favor of changes to 74 that would have a competing interest with the bypass. And that sort of makes sense because, as I talked about before, the only way the bypass is going to save 20 to 30 minutes is if 74 gets increasingly more congested over time. DOT's most recent documents, as I said, demonstrate that in opening year, the bypass will save between 8 and 12 minutes if you're taking it all the way from Marshville up to Charlotte. At a cost of $900 million, that's approximately $100 million a minute. DOT says that the bypass's travel time savings will increase to 20 to 30 minutes in the future, again, but only because 74 will get worse, not because the bypass will somehow get faster. And here's a quick illustration from DOT's documents showing the different travel times. It's a little hard to see, but in this area they expect 2 to 3 minutes savings. In this area of Marshville is where you're going to see the 8 to 10 minutes of travel time savings, and here is about 3 and about 7 over here. And here we just have, I know there's been a lot of questions about these figures in the past, so here we just pulled up a page from DOT's most recent documents demonstrating that right now, when in their modeling, the average speeds on 74 at different times of day are about 40 miles per hour, and it takes about 32 minutes to go from one end of the corridor to the other. So that's where they're basing that travel time savings of 8 to 12 minutes from.
And this is not our data, but this is data that we've gotten from NCDOT.
And again, this is a page just taken from their most recent internal memo showing where they came up with those travel times and average speeds. And here, another internal document showing that this is another memo from DOT saying they expect average travel time savings of over 8 minutes. Now, based on those travel time savings, the tolls, which y'all would pay here, are almost double those that are being paid in Raleigh currently. The one toll road that we do have in North Carolina, drivers pay $2.34 to save 20 minutes, whereas the Monroe bypass you'd be paying $2.58 to save an estimated 8 to 12 minutes. And again, here's just this is from DOT's traffic and revenue study, just demonstrating the tolls there. So at that price and with a travel time savings of only 8 to 10 or 8 to 12 minutes, would anyone really use the bypass, especially when you consider truckers are going to have to be paying $10 a trip to save about 10 minutes? Well, DOT admits that trucking companies, when they asked them, were mixed about whether they would pay that price. And actually, when they asked that question, that was back when they thought the travel time savings were going to be much greater. DOT has not reevaluated this to our knowledge, and I know a lot of people are really hoping the bypass will take the trucks off 74, but certainly it has never been established that that is the case. And lots of truckers we have spoken to said they do anything they can do to avoid paying a toll. DOT has never studied how much of the truck traffic on 74 is through traffic versus local traffic going from one part of Union County to another part of Union County. And it's really only those through trucks coming from the beach up to Asheville or Charlotte that would even think about using the bypass in the first place. So that's an important point that has not been. And then a really essential point, DOT's entire revenue study that underlays its financial model was based on previous estimates in which they thought in opening year the bypass would save 20 to 30 minutes. Well, believe it or not, US 74 has actually improved since that time, and so they had to revise their travel time savings to 8 to 12 minutes. And yet they haven't revisited that revenue study. So we don't know how many people are really going to be paying these tolls and whether the bypass is at all cost effective. DOT, as I have mentioned, assumes that 74 is going to get much, much worse in the future, and they assume that because they think that there's going to be much more traffic on 74 in the future and more growth. And yet between 2007 and 2012, DOT's most recent documents show that there has been no increase in traffic on 74. So these are all questions that we don't have answers to. They're just questions that need to be asked to DOT while we're reevaluating the bypass and whether it's a good use of $900 million. Is anyone going to use it? Now, the other big question and big reason for building the bypass that we hear all the time is that it's going to bring so much growth and economic development to Union County. And again, we don't have an answer as to whether or not that is the case. All we know is that DOT says that it is not going to bring growth to Union County. And here's a page from DOT's EIS, Environmental Impact Statement. It's a little hard to see, but the last column there shows the difference between building the bypass and not building the bypass in terms of growth, and it's more or less than 1% difference. And the latest growth data, the latest updated growth data is similar. 1, maybe barely 2%, but in some cases it'll be less than 1% or even 0 growth with or without the bypass. Instead, what DOT has said they're now expecting is that the bypass will affect where the growth goes. They say growth will come with or without the bypass. The bypass has no real impact on whether growth comes. It'll just change where that growth goes. And so what they are suggesting in the most recent documents is that growth will shift to interchanges and shift potentially to Marshville and the areas that are further out. Whereas for areas like downtown Monroe, growth might shift out of there. So you're just sort of redistributing the growth that's going around to areas that become more accessible. As I mentioned, many locals believe that the bypass will result in a lot of growth. The Union County Chamber of Commerce sent around a number of resolutions for towns to sign saying that we need this bypass because it's going to bring so much growth. And some town councils have actually been scared that it'll bring too much growth and that it'll place an additional tax burden on their towns. They don't really want to see this sprawling growth that they can't really support. And so there's a lot of inconsistency out there about whether the bypass will bring growth or won't bring growth. And I think the bottom line is we need more of a consistent answer about that. If we're building the bypass to bring growth, then we need to be fairly sure that it's going to do that. And if DOT says it is not going to do that, then we need to ask them why, and we need to all get on the same page. A few other impacts in Union County that are very important for a lot of people. The bypass will destroy almost 500 acres of active agricultural lands. Several families will lose their family farms, and some of those farms have been in families for generations, in one case since the Revolutionary War. 95 households, 47 businesses, and 3 churches will all be forced to relocate, and the road will cut through 7 neighborhoods. So what might help Union County travelers? Well, there are some more cost-effective solutions than the proposed Monroe bypass. What could DOT do? Well, we really want to see it open a full and a serious consideration of smart alternatives. The state currently is broke for transportation money. There is not enough money to go around, and $900 million on one bypass, you're not going to see that really anywhere else. So we need to start thinking smarter. So we're asking them to consider updating the existing parallel roads. We'll talk about that more in a minute. Revisit their own 2007 report, which said that for $13 million in improvements, you could provide a satisfactory level of flow, not a 70 mile per hour level of flow, but something satisfactory at 22 out of 23 of the intersections between Stallings and 601. And happily, DOT has begun to implement some of these ideas, working on the traffic signal, timing, and even going to be putting in some super streets, which we can talk about in a minute, and Indian Trail. So here are some of the parallel routes they might consider improving. There's the Monroe Road Loop. This is already on the 2040 MTP, and this would act as sort of a mini bypass around Monroe. Then there's Old Charlotte Road, Old Monroe Highway, which you should all be familiar with because we're right on it. And that could be improved, and as you can see, that parallels both 74 and the bypass. And then Seacrest Shortcut also follows the bypass for much of its length and could be improved to help the local traffic flow. Other improvements that could be made: improving the timing of the traffic signals or eliminating some traffic signals. Super street upgrades to intersections. For those of you not familiar with this, this is when you basically eliminate left turns so that you're turning sometimes 3 rights, and it might sound counterintuitive, but it actually helps the traffic flow a lot faster because you're not having to ever wait for traffic to cut across you.
And more safely, too.
Yeah, much more safely. And as I mentioned, some of those super streets are finally, that were recommended in 2007, are finally now in the plan to be implemented along 74 in Indian Trail. Additional overpasses so that you have roads going over 74 rather than cutting straight through 74. Additional auxiliary turn lanes. Service roads for businesses so that you can hop from one business to another rather than having to get on 74 every time between your different trips. And fewer side streets crossing 74 directly. All of these are small scale, much less expensive solutions that could really help improve mobility on 74. Now, I will say, I'll be honest, we're never going to be able to drive on 74 at 70 miles per hour. And that's what DOT's only alternative they'll look at is something where you can drive at 65, 70 mile per hour to get through Union County. That's not going to happen on 74. Let's all be honest. But we can improve it so that it's much better than the current 40 mile per hour that it is, and save a few minutes. And at least we would suggest that that might be a more effective way of spending $900 million.
And that's what we hear people in Union County say that they want, is to have 74 improved at a level that can improve their quality of life.
So why should you care? Well, as I've said, it's not clear that the toll road is designed will actually help people in Union County. In some areas it will, and for people wanting to use the bypass to get from Marshville to Charlotte, it'll certainly help. But if you're hoping that the bypass is going to make 74 better for your commute, you don't want to pay the toll, but you want to stay on 74 and have a better commute, that is not what the bypass is intended to do. If you're hoping that the bypass will spur a lot of business and growth and development, again, that is not what the bypass is intended to do, and DOT has said it's not expected to do that. $900 million that's nearly $1 billion. That's a lot of money to spend when so many questions remain, and especially if 74 can be improved for so much less. Other areas of Union County have immediate road improvement and maintenance needs that DOT is not meeting because, like I said, the state is broke. And if the bypass spurs this massive new commuter subdivision growth, will that be a benefit or will that be a burden for some homes already in Union County who have to kind of bear the additional tax burden of some of that new subdivision growth? So, is there a better way to meet Union County's needs? We're just asking to find out. We want to know this time we want a careful study which really looks at these issues and doesn't set up strawman alternatives, doesn't gloss over facts, doesn't mislead the public. We want thoughtful questions asked. We want people to go back to the drawing board and really think about what is best for Union County. How can we fix this in a cost-effective and responsible way?
And look at what Union County folks are actually saying to NCDOT, listening to some of the feedback that we've been hearing.